The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the general store, and Clara Anderson pressed her gloved hand against her swollen left eye, willing herself not to cry as the door swung open and harsh afternoon sunlight flooded the cramped interior. Goldfield, Nevada stretched before her like a promise she desperately wanted to believe in, all weathered wood and dusty streets baking under the relentless summer sun of 1882. She had traveled over 2,000 miles to escape one nightmare, only to arrive bearing its marks on her face. The bruise had turned from angry red to a sickly purple-green during the journey, and no amount of powder could hide it. She had stopped trying 3 days ago. "Miss Anderson," a deep voice called from outside the coach, and Clara forced herself to look up. The man standing there was tall, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of winter sky. He wore dusty denim and a worn leather vest, his brown hair slightly too long beneath his hat. He was perhaps 28 or 29, with strong hands that he held carefully at his sides, as if he understood that sudden movements might frighten her. This was Yates Kimball, the rancher who had placed the advertisement that changed her life. "Yes," Clara managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She was 22, though she felt decades older after the past year. Yates extended his hand to help her down but froze when she turned fully toward him and the sunlight illuminated her injured face. Something flickered in those pale eyes, something dark and protective and furious all at once. "Who did that to you?" His voice had gone soft, deadly calm. Clara flinched despite herself, her hand tightening on the coach door. "It does not matter now. I am here. That life is behind me." "Like hell it does not matter." Yates stepped closer but stopped when she shrank back. He took a deliberate breath, visibly forcing himself to relax his stance. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler, though no less intense. "I am sorry. I did not mean to frighten you. But whoever put their hands on you, that life ends today. You understand me? Right here, right now. That ends." Something in Clara's chest, something that had been wound tight as a clock spring for months, loosened just a fraction. She searched his face for signs of deception, for the false kindness that could turn to cruelty in a heartbeat, but found only steady sincerity. "I need my trunk," she said quietly, because she did not know what else to say. Yates nodded and moved to help the driver with her belongings, a single worn trunk that contained everything she owned in the world. As he lifted it, she noticed the easy strength in his movements, the way other men on the street nodded to him with respect. This was a man people trusted, she realized. A man with a reputation. "My wagon is just here," he said, gesturing toward a sturdy buckboard hitched to 2 patient horses. "The ranch is about 5 miles out. It is not much, but it is clean and safe and yours now if you want it to be." That last part made her look at him sharply. "If I want it to be?" "Yes, madam." He settled her trunk in the wagon bed with care. "I know we had an arrangement through letters, but I will not hold you to anything. If you want to stay in town instead, or if you want passage back east, I will provide it. No questions, no conditions." "I have no money for passage anywhere," Clara said, hating how small her voice sounded. "Did not say you needed any." Yates met her eyes directly. "A woman shows up to meet a stranger with a black eye. I figure she is running from something bad. I will not be another bad thing in your life, Miss Anderson. That is a promise." Clara felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried when Robert struck her the first time, or the 10th. She had not cried during the long journey west, sitting among strangers who averted their eyes from her bruises. She would not cry now in the middle of a dusty Nevada street in front of this rancher who spoke to her like she was something precious instead of something broken. "I would like to see the ranch," she said finally. Relief crossed Yates's face, quick as summer lightning. "Yes, madam." Let me help you up." This time when he offered his hand, Clara took it. His palm was calloused but warm, and he handed her up onto the wagon seat with the same care someone might use with fine china. He climbed up beside her, careful to leave proper space between them, and clicked to the horses. They rolled out of Goldfield at a steady pace, leaving behind the handful of buildings that constituted the town proper. Clara had seen the usual establishments: general store, saloon, bank, hotel, church, blacksmith. It was larger than she had expected, actually. The silver mining in the area brought people seeking fortune, though the real boom would not come for another couple of decades. "You must have questions," Yates said after a few minutes of silence. "I will answer anything you want to know." Clara kept her eyes on the desert landscape stretching endlessly in all directions, dotted with sage and the occasional stubborn juniper. "Why did you place the advertisement?" "For a mail-order bride. Practical reasons, mostly." His voice was steady, honest. "I have a working ranch, 200 acres with decent water. I run cattle and some horses. It is a good living, but it is lonely work. I am gone sometimes from before dawn until after dark. I wanted someone to share it with, someone to build something with. But there are not many unmarried women out here, and the ones who have their pick of suitors. I am not much for courting anyway. Seemed simpler to be direct about intentions. And you do not mind that I arrived looking like this?" Clara touched her eye gently. "I mind very much," Yates said, and there was that edge of anger again. "But not the way you mean. I mind that someone hurt you. I mind that you felt you had to travel all this way to escape. I mind that you are sitting there afraid of me when I would cut off my own hand before I raised it to you." The vehemence in his words made Clara turn to study him. "You do not know me. I could be a terrible person. I could be lazy or mean-spirited or any number of things." "Could be," Yates agreed. "But I doubt it. Your letters were kind. You wrote about wanting a quiet life, honest work, maybe children someday. You asked about my horses like you cared about the answer. That told me what I needed to know. Letters can lie. So can people in person." He glanced at her, and something in his expression softened. "I am willing to take the chance if you are. And if it turns out we do not suit, we will figure something else out. But I meant what I said. You are safe now." Clara wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. Instead, she asked, "Do you have help at the ranch, hands?" "Two. Miguel and his son Tomás. They have a cottage on the property. Miguel has worked the ranch since before I bought it 5 years ago. They are good men, respectful. Tomás is 18, just getting started really. Miguel's wife passed some years back, so they are grateful for the work and the home." The miles passed beneath the wagon wheels, and gradually Clara felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. The air was hot and dry, so different from the humid summers back in Pennsylvania. That was where Robert found her, where he had courted her with pretty words and promises, where he had shown his true nature only after they married. The marriage that lasted 6 terrible months before she found the advertisement in a discarded newspaper and wrote to a stranger in Nevada with shaking hands. "How did you get away?" Yates asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Clara had not planned to tell him, but something about the open sky and his steady presence loosened her tongue. He was a clerk in a law office. Ambitious. Everyone thought he was so respectable, so proper. But at home, when things did not go his way, or when he had been drinking, or sometimes for no reason at all, he would. She trailed off. "You do not have to explain," Yates said. "I understand enough." "He went to Philadelphia on business," Clara continued anyway, needing to say it out loud to someone who might believe her. 2 weeks. I sold everything I could, withdrew what little money I had access to, and bought passage west. He will be looking for me, but I doubt he will look here. I told no one my plans. If he does find you, he will have to go through me." There was no bravado in Yates's statement, just flat certainty. "And I promise you, he will not take you anywhere you do not want to go." They crested a small rise, and below them spread a valley with a creek running through it, green against the brown landscape. A ranch house sat near the water, built of wood and stone with a porch that wrapped around two sides. There was a barn, a corral with horses, and in the distance, Clara could see cattle grazing. Smoke rose from the chimney of a smaller building, which must be the cottage where Miguel and Tomás lived. "It is beautiful," Clara said, and meant it. "It is home," Yates replied simply. "Or I hope it will be for you." As they drew closer, Clara could see someone had planted flowers near the house, though they looked thirsty and neglected. A dog came bounding out to meet them, tail wagging furiously. It was a medium-sized mutt with floppy ears and enthusiastic affection. "That is Copper," Yates said with obvious fondness. "He is friendly but excitable. If he bothers you, just tell him off." But Clara was already smiling, the first genuine smile since she could remember, as Copper danced alongside the wagon. She had always wanted a dog. Robert had forbidden it. Yates brought the wagon to a halt in front of the house and set the brake. Before he could move to help her down, Clara stood, and the sudden movement made her head swim. She had not eaten much during the journey, too nervous and too queasy from the rocking of the stagecoach. "Easy," Yates said, and then his hands were at her waist, steadying her. "When did you last have a proper meal?" "Yesterday morning," Clara admitted, "or perhaps the day before." Something that might have been a curse escaped his lips, too quiet for her to catch the words. "Come inside. I will get you fed and settled, and then we can talk about everything else." The interior of the house was dim and cool after the bright sunlight, and Clara stood in the main room, taking it in. There was a fireplace, a table with chairs, a kitchen area with a good stove, and doors leading to what must be bedrooms. Everything was clean but spare, the home of a man who lived alone and saw no point in decoration. But the bones of it were good, solid. It could be a real home with some effort. "Bedroom is through there," Yates said, pointing. "It is yours now. I will take the spare room, the smaller one. There is a washroom too, though the tub is old. Water comes from the creek, but I have a system that works well enough." "Where do you sleep now?" Clara asked. "The room I just gave you." He was already moving toward the kitchen, pulling out bread and cheese and dried meat. "But it is no trouble to move my things. I can do it while you eat." "I cannot take your room," Clara protested. "You can and you will." Yates set the food on the table and poured water from a pitcher. "Sit down and eat, please. You look ready to fall over." She was hungry enough to obey, sinking into a chair and reaching for the bread. It was good, hearty, and fresh. The cheese was sharp and the meat was venison, she thought. She ate slowly, conscious of Yates moving around the house, true to his word about relocating his belongings. When he emerged from the bedroom, he carried an armload of clothes and books. "All yours now," he said. "I put fresh sheets on yesterday, but I can change them again if you prefer." "Yesterday?" Clara paused with a piece of cheese halfway to her mouth. "You knew I was arriving. The stagecoach runs on a schedule, more or less." He disappeared into the smaller bedroom, and she heard the sounds of him settling in. When he returned, he poured himself water and sat across from her, but did not crowd her space. "I have been preparing for a few days. Made sure the house was clean, got extra supplies in town. I wanted everything to be ready." "You were very certain I would come," Clara said. "I was hopeful." Yates took a drink. "But even if you had changed your mind, the cleaning needed doing anyway." They sat in companionable silence while Clara finished eating. Copper had followed them inside and now lay at Yates's feet, occasionally thumping his tail against the floor. Through the window, she could see the valley stretching away, peaceful and isolated. "What do you expect from me?" Clara asked finally, setting down her cup. "You have been kind, but I do not understand what you want in return." Yates considered his words carefully. "I expect nothing that you are not willing to give. We can marry properly if you want that. There is a preacher in town who comes through monthly, or we can go to the courthouse. But we can also wait, give you time to decide if this is what you want. As for the rest, I need help running the household. Cooking, mending, keeping things organized. Miguel and Tomás take care of the livestock and the land, but the house is another matter. In return, you have a home and safety and a share in everything I have built here. And when you want a wife in truth, not just in name?" Clara asked, forcing herself to meet his eyes. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by something that might have been sadness. "That only happens if and when you want it to," he said quietly. "I will not force myself on you, Clara. Not ever. If someday you come to care for me and want that kind of marriage, I would be grateful beyond words. But if you need this to be a business arrangement only, I will respect that. Your body is yours. No man has a right to it without your willing consent." Tears did come then, silent and hot down Clara's cheeks. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed of the display but unable to stop. A chair scraped, and she tensed, but Yates did not approach her. When she dared to look up, she saw he had moved to the window, giving her privacy in her breakdown. "I am sorry," she managed. "Do not be." He kept his back to her, giving her dignity. "You have been through hell. You are allowed to feel it." When she had composed herself, wiping her face with the napkin he had provided, she said, "I would like to marry you properly. Not immediately, but soon. I need the protection of your name. Robert might try to find me, and if I am legally your wife, he has no claim." "We can go to town tomorrow if you like," Yates said, turning back to face her. "The courthouse is open most days. It is a simple process. Would you mind waiting a few days, until my eye heals more?" The vanity of it made her flush, but she could not help it. She did not want to marry again with bruises on her face. "Whatever you want," Yates agreed. "Take all the time you need." A knock on the door interrupted them, and a voice called out in accented English. "Mr. Yates, we saw the wagon. Is everything well?" "Come in, Miguel," Yates called back. The man who entered was older, perhaps 50, with silver threading through his black hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the sun. Behind him came a younger man who shared his features, tall and lean and watchful. This would be Tomás. Both men stopped short when they saw Clara, and she watched their eyes take in her bruised face. Something flickered in Miguel's expression, something knowing and sad. "Miss Anderson arrived safely," Yates said, his tone carefully neutral. "Clara, this is Miguel Santos and his son Tomás. They run this ranch as much as I do." "It is good to meet you," Clara said, standing and offering her hand. Miguel shook it gently, and Tomás did the same, both men careful and respectful. "Welcome to the ranch, Miss Anderson," Miguel said. "If you need anything, anything at all, you have only to ask." "Thank you," Clara said softly. "We will let you settle in," Miguel said, reading the situation with the wisdom of experience. "Tomás and I were just checking in. We have the north fence to mend this afternoon." After they left, Yates said, "Miguel's wife, Rosa, she had a hard life before they came here. He understands some things without needing explanation." Clara nodded, grateful that she would not have to endure curiosity or judgment from the ranch hands. "You have good people here." "I try to." Yates collected the dishes from the table. "Why do not you rest? You must be exhausted from traveling. I will be working around the property if you need anything, but the house is yours. Sleep, bathe, whatever you require." The idea of sleep was suddenly overwhelming in its appeal. Clara had not had a full night's rest in months, always listening for footsteps, for the sound of Robert coming home drunk and angry. "A nap would be wonderful," she admitted. Yates showed her to the bedroom, and Clara found he had not exaggerated about giving her the better room. It was larger than the other, with a real bed frame and mattress, a dresser, a chair by the window. Simple but comfortable. The sheets were indeed fresh, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. "Did you pick these?" she asked, touching a purple bloom. "Tomas probably," Yates said, looking a bit embarrassed. "He is more sentimental than he lets on. I will leave you to rest." But Clara touched his arm before he could go, and he froze. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this. I know you do not know if I will be a good wife or if this arrangement will work, but thank you for giving me a chance." "Thank you for trusting me enough to come," Yates replied. His eyes were warm, sincere. "Sleep well, Clara." After he left, closing the door quietly behind him, Clara sat on the bed and tested the mattress. It was firm but comfortable, better than the one she had shared with Robert, which had smelled of whiskey and regret. This room smelled of clean linen and the faint scent of the wildflowers. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes in the air. She removed her travel-stained dress and hung it carefully, then lay down in her chemise and closed her eyes. Outside, she could hear the distant sounds of the ranch, horses whinnying, the low of cattle, men's voices calling to each other. And underneath it all, a sense of peace she had not felt in so long. When Clara woke, the sunlight had shifted to late afternoon gold. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then memory returned, and with it a cautious sense of relief. She was in Nevada. She was safe. She was in Yates Kimball's house, and he had promised that her old life ended here. She rose and found her trunk had been brought into the room, placed carefully at the foot of the bed. She opened it and pulled out a clean dress, simple blue cotton, and her hairbrush. There was a mirror on the dresser, and she forced herself to look at her reflection. The bruise around her eye was still ugly, but the swelling had gone down. In another week, it would fade to yellow and then disappear. The physical mark would vanish, though she knew the internal ones would take longer. After dressing and fixing her hair into a simple bun, Clara ventured out of the bedroom. The main room was empty, but she could see through the window that Yates was working with one of the horses in the corral. He moved with easy confidence, speaking to the animal in a low voice she could not quite hear. The horse, a young chestnut, was skittish, but Yates was patient, never rushing, never forcing. Clara explored the kitchen, taking inventory. The supplies were basic but adequate: flour, salt, sugar, coffee, dried beans, some preserved vegetables. There was fresh meat wrapped in cloth in the cold box, venison probably, and eggs. She could make a good dinner with this. She had just started pulling out ingredients when the front door opened and Yates entered, brushing dust from his pants. He stopped when he saw her in the kitchen. "You are awake," he said, stating the obvious. "Did you rest well?" "Very well, thank you." Clara indicated the food on the counter. "I thought I might make dinner if that is all right. It is the least I can do." "You do not have to earn your keep immediately," Yates said, but he looked pleased. "But I will not say no to a home-cooked meal. It has been a while since I had one of those." "What do you usually eat?" "Whatever is simplest. Beans, jerky, bread if I remember to buy it in town." He poured himself water from the pitcher. "Rosa, Miguel's wife, she used to cook sometimes. She made these incredible tortillas and this stew with peppers that could bring tears to your eyes. After she died, Miguel and Tomas kept to themselves more. I do not blame them." "How long ago did she pass?" Clara asked, measuring out flour for biscuits. 3 years this autumn. Fever took her quick. 1 week she was fine, the next she was gone." Yates leaned against the counter, watching Clara work. "Miguel was lost for a long time after. Work was the only thing that kept him going. Tomas, too. "It is good they have each other," Clara said. She mixed the biscuit dough with practiced hands, her mother having taught her to cook, before everything fell apart. Before her parents died in the fire that left Clara alone at 19, vulnerable to men like Robert, who saw an orphan with no protection and recognized an easy target. "They are lucky in that," Yates agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I need to clean up before dinner. There is a washroom through that door if you need it, and I will use the pump outside. Takes me longer, but the hot water is yours." After he left, Clara finished preparing the meal: biscuits, venison steaks, and beans cooked with a bit of salt pork she found. It was simple fare, but hearty. She set the table, found plates and utensils, and by the time Yates returned, clean and with his hair damp, everything was ready. They ate together as the sun set beyond the windows, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Yates complimented the food genuinely, and they talked about small things: the ranch, the weather, the neighbors miles away. He told her about the town, about the silver mining that brought prospectors through regularly, about the harsh winters that could isolate the ranch for weeks at a time. "Does that frighten you?" he asked. "Being snowed in out here?" "No," Clara said honestly. "Isolation sounds peaceful." Something in her tone made him study her face. "You really were alone in that marriage, were not you? Even surrounded by people." "Especially surrounded by people," Clara corrected. "Everyone thought Robert was so wonderful. If I had tried to tell them the truth, they would not have believed me. Or worse, they would have said it was my fault, that I must have provoked him somehow." "It is never the victim's fault," Yates said firmly. "Any man who raises his hand to a woman is a coward, plain and simple." They cleaned up the dishes together, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised Clara. Robert had never helped with household tasks, viewing them as beneath him. But Yates dried while she washed and put things away without being asked, knowing where everything belonged in his own kitchen. "I should check on the stock one more time before full dark," Yates said after they finished. "Will you be all right here alone?" "I am not afraid of being alone," Clara assured him. "I am more afraid of not being alone." He understood what she meant. "Lock the door if it makes you feel better. I have a key, but I will knock before I come in so you know it is me." After he left, Clara did lock the door, then stood in the main room of the house, listening to the silence. It was not the oppressive silence of her marriage, waiting for the other shoe to drop. This was peaceful silence, the kind that settled into bones and eased tight muscles. She walked to the window and looked out at the darkening valley, at the stars beginning to emerge in the vast Nevada sky. Somewhere out there, Yates was tending to his animals, doing the work that kept this ranch running. And tomorrow she would wake up here in this place and begin building something new. The knock came perhaps 20 minutes later, and Yates's voice called out, "It is me, Clara. I am coming in." She unlocked the door and let him in, noting the way he had warned her, giving her time to prepare. These small kindnesses were adding up, building a picture of who this man really was. "Everything is secure for the night," he reported. "Miguel and Tomas are settled in. The stock is fine. We should have a quiet night." They stood there somewhat awkwardly, two strangers who had legally agreed to marry but did not really know each other yet. Finally, Yates said, "I usually read a bit before bed. I have some books if you would like to borrow one. Not much selection, but better than nothing." "I would like that," Clara said, grateful for the normalcy of it. He showed her his small collection: a Bible, a volume of Shakespeare, a few penny dreadful westerns, and surprisingly, a book of poetry. Clara reached for the poetry, and Yates looked embarrassed. "That was my mother's," he said. "I am not much for poetry myself, but I kept it after she passed." "May I read it?" Clara asked. "Of course. It is yours if you want it." They settled into chairs by the fire that Yates built against the desert's cooling night, each reading by lamplight. Clara felt herself relaxing into the domesticity of it, the simple pleasure of reading while another person sat nearby, not demanding anything, not needing her to be anything other than herself. She glanced over once to find Yates absorbed in his book, lips moving slightly as he read, and felt a strange flutter in her chest. He was handsome, she realized, in a rough, honest way. Strong features, kind eyes, hands that knew hard work. And he had not once looked at her with the hunger and possession she had seen in Robert's gaze. He looked at her like she was a person, not property. When the clock on the mantel struck 9, Yates closed his book and stood. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow, if you are feeling up to it, I thought I could show you around the ranch properly. Introduce you to the horses, show you where everything is, but only if you want to." "I would like that," Clara said. She stood as well, carefully setting the poetry book aside. "Good night, Yates." "Good night, Clara. Sleep well." She retired to her room and changed into her nightgown, then climbed into the bed that still smelled of fresh linen. Through the walls, she could hear the faint sounds of Yates settling into his own room. It was strange, knowing he was just on the other side of that wall, but also comforting. For the first time in a year, she felt safe enough to truly sleep. The days that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Clara would wake early and make breakfast for herself and Yates. They would eat together, talking about the day's plans, and then he would go out to work while she tended the house. It needed a woman's touch, she quickly realized. The place was clean but stark, lacking any warmth or personality. She began making small changes. Curtains for the windows that she sewed from fabric Yates brought back from town, cushions for the chairs, a tablecloth. She revived the neglected flowers and planted a small vegetable garden near the house. Tamaz helped her prepare the soil, shy but eager to assist. Her bruise faded day by day, until by the end of the first week, it was barely visible. On the 8th day of her residence at the ranch, Clara woke to find she felt almost like herself again, or at least like a person who might someday be whole. She dressed carefully in her best dress, the deep green one she had saved for special occasions, and fixed her hair with extra care. When she emerged, Yates was already at the table with coffee. He looked up and his eyes widened slightly. "You look beautiful," he said, then immediately flushed. "I am sorry, that was forward of me." "It was kind of you," Clara corrected. She poured herself coffee and sat across from him. "I was thinking if the offer still stands, we could go to town today, to the courthouse." Yates set down his cup carefully. "Are you certain? There is no rush, Clara." "I am certain." And she was. This man had proven himself in 100 small ways over the past week. He was patient, respectful, hardworking, and kind. He made her laugh with his dry observations about the ranch animals. He listened when she talked. He had never once pressured her or made her uncomfortable. She might not love him yet, but she trusted him, and that was worth more than any romance. "I would like to be your wife legally. I would like the protection of your name, and I would like to start building our life together properly." "Then we will go today," Yates said, and his smile was bright as the desert sun. "Right after breakfast. We can take the wagon, make a day of it. There is a cafe in town that serves decent food. We could have our wedding meal there, such as it is." "That sounds perfect," Clara said, and meant it. They made the journey to Goldfield in the clear morning, the horses setting a good pace on the well-worn road. Clara wore her best dress and a hat to shade her face from the sun. Yates had put on a clean shirt and actually combed his hair with some sort of pomade that made it behave. They looked, Clara thought, like any other couple going to town on business. The courthouse was a simple building, but official. The clerk who processed their paperwork was an older woman with sharp eyes who looked at Clara's fading bruise and then at Yates with clear assessment. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because she softened and even smiled a bit. "You need a witness," she said. "Do you have one?" "I can stand witness," came a voice from behind them, and they turned to find a woman in her 30s, well-dressed, with intelligent eyes and a kind face. "I am Margaret Hughes. My husband is the town doctor. I was here on other business, but I would be happy to witness your marriage." "That is very kind of you," Clara said, grateful. The ceremony itself was brief, just a recitation of legal vows and the signing of papers. But when Yates slipped a simple gold band onto Clara's finger, a ring he had clearly purchased sometime in the past few days, she felt the significance of it settle over her like a cloak. She was married again, but this time to a man who had already proven he would not hurt her. "You may kiss your bride," the clerk said, somewhat perfunctorily. Yates looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. She nodded, granting permission, and he leaned in to press the gentlest kiss to her lips, there and gone in a moment, respectful even now. "Congratulations," Margaret said warmly, shaking both their hands. "I hope you will be very happy together. Clara, if you ever need anything at all, please come find me. My husband's office is next to the general store." The meaningful emphasis made Clara understand that Margaret recognized a woman who had been in trouble. She was offering help, should it be needed. "Thank you," Clara said sincerely. "That means more than you know." They had their wedding meal at the cafe, simple but good food, and Yates bought her a peppermint stick from the general store, which made her laugh. "I am not a child," she protested. "Everyone deserves a treat on their wedding day," he countered, and his eyes were warm. On the journey back to the ranch, Clara found herself studying her new husband. He handled the horses with easy competence, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area. He had been in Nevada for 7 years, having come west after his parents died back in Illinois. He was 29, had learned ranching by doing it, and had built his spread from almost nothing. "Why did you never marry before?" Clara asked. "You must have had opportunities." "I was too busy building the ranch," Yates said. "And I suppose I never met anyone who made me want to stop working long enough to court properly. I am not good with fancy words or romance. I figured a straightforward arrangement would suit me better." "Do you regret that now?" Clara asked softly. "Taking on a wife who arrived damaged?" Yates pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road and turned to look at her fully. "You listen to me, Clara Kimball. You are not damaged. You are a survivor. There is a difference. And I do not regret one single moment since you stepped off that stagecoach. If anything, I am grateful that you trusted me enough to come here to give this a chance. So no, I do not regret anything." The use of her new name made Clara's breath catch. She was Clara Kimball now, not Clara Anderson. She had a new identity, a new life, a new chance. "Thank you," she whispered. They arrived back at the ranch in the afternoon to find Miguel and Tomás had been busy. The front porch had been swept clean, and someone had picked more wildflowers, arranging them in jars around the entrance. A bottle of wine sat on the table inside with a note in Spanish that made Yates chuckle. "What does it say?" Clara asked. "Miguel says congratulations, and that the wine is from his private stock, which means it is actually good. He also says they will make themselves scarce for the evening to give us privacy." Yates looked a bit embarrassed. "They mean well." Clara felt her cheeks warm, understanding the implication, but when she glanced at Yates, he was already moving to give her space. "I will go check on the evening chores," he said. "Give you time to settle in. We can have dinner later, maybe try Miguel's wine." "Yates," Clara said, and he stopped. "We are married now. You do not have to avoid me." "I am not avoiding you," he said carefully. I am giving you space. There is a difference. I know you have been patient, Clara continued, forcing herself to be brave. And I am grateful, but I also do not want you to feel cheated in this marriage. You did not sign up for a celibate arrangement. I signed up for whatever you are willing to give, Yates said firmly. If that is companionship and nothing more, then I am content. If someday you want more, I will be the happiest man in Nevada. But I will not rush you, Clara. I will not push. You set the pace for everything in this marriage. That is a promise. The sincerity in his voice, the clear respect he had for her autonomy, made something in Clara's chest unfold like a flower toward the sun. She crossed the room to where he stood and took his hand, the one with calluses from hard work, the one that had never been raised against her. I am not ready for everything, she said honestly, but I would like you to stay for dinner. I would like to share Miguel's wine with my husband. And I would like to try slowly to build something real with you. Yates's fingers tightened gently around hers. I would like that too. They prepared dinner together, and Clara felt the ease growing between them. Yates told her about the young horse he was training, the one she had seen him working with that first day. The animal had been mistreated by its previous owner and was learning to trust again. Like you, Yates said, then immediately looked horrified. I am sorry, that was thoughtless. But Clara was smiling. No, it is accurate. We are both learning to trust again. They opened Miguel's wine, which was indeed excellent, and ate by candlelight because Clara wanted to, because it felt special. Yates talked more over dinner, loosened by the wine and the comfortable atmosphere, telling her about his childhood in Illinois, about his parents who had loved each other deeply until the day they died within months of each other. His father of a heart attack and his mother of what everyone said was a broken heart. That is what I wanted, Yates admitted, his words a bit softer than usual. That kind of love, the kind where you are so connected that you cannot imagine life without the other person, but I am also practical enough to know that kind of love is rare. I would be content with respect and companionship. Anything else is a bonus. I do not know if I can love like that, Clara said quietly. Robert hurt me in ways that go beyond bruises. I do not know if I can ever trust someone completely again. Then we will build what we can, Yates said. And if that is enough for you, it is enough for me. They sat together after dinner, closer than they had before, and Yates carefully, slowly, put his arm around Clara's shoulders. She stiffened for only a moment before forcing herself to relax. This was Yates. He would not hurt her. His arm was warm and solid, and after a few minutes, Clara found herself leaning into his side just a little. This is nice, she murmured. It is, he agreed. They stayed like that until the fire burned low and exhaustion pulled at both of them. When they rose to retire, Yates walked Clara to her door and kissed her forehead gently, a gesture so sweet it made her eyes prick with tears. Good night, wife, he said softly. Good night, husband, she replied. In her room, Clara changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, but sleep was elusive. She could hear Yates moving around in the next room, the creak of the bed as he lay down. They were married now. This was her life. And slowly, carefully, she was beginning to believe it might be a good life. The weeks that followed were some of the most peaceful Clara had ever known. She fell into the rhythm of ranch life, rising early, cooking, tending her garden, mending clothes, sometimes helping Tomas with the younger animals. She learned to gather eggs from the chickens they kept, to milk the cow, to preserve vegetables for the winter. Her hands, which had been soft back in Pennsylvania, developed calluses. Her skin took on a faint tan despite the hat she wore. She grew stronger, both in body and in spirit. Yates courted her in his own way, bringing her small gifts from town. A new book, ribbons for her hair, a set of proper gardening tools. He taught her to ride the gentlest of his horses, a mare named Daisy, and they would sometimes ride out together in the evening, exploring the edges of his property. He was careful with her always, but also treated her as an equal, asking her opinion on ranch matters, listening when she suggested improvements to the house. Miguel and Tomás became her friends, though it took time. Miguel would tell her stories about the area, about the years before Yates bought the ranch, about his beloved Rosa. Tomás, shy at first, gradually opened up, revealing a young man with dreams of having his own land someday. Clara would pack extra food and send it to their cottage, and Maria, Miguel's sister who lived in town, visited once and cried when she saw how well Clara treated her family. 2 months into their marriage, Clara woke one morning to find frost on the windows and Yates already up, stoking the fire. She emerged from her room wrapped in a shawl to find him making coffee. "Morning came cold," he said. "Winter is on its way." Clara moved to help with breakfast, and they worked side by side in the pre-dawn darkness. It felt comfortable, domestic, right. When Yates reached past her for a pan and his body brushed against hers, Clara did not flinch away. When his hand settled briefly on her waist, she leaned into the touch. "Clara," he said softly, and there was a question in his voice. She turned to face him, still in the circle of his arms. "I am not afraid of you anymore," she said. "I have not been for a while now." "I am glad," Yates replied, but he did not push further. That evening after dinner, Clara made a decision. She went to Yates, who was reading by the fire, and took the book gently from his hands. He looked up at her, confused, and she felt her heart hammering. "I would like you to kiss me," she said. "Really kiss me, not like at the courthouse." Yates stood slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might spook her. "Are you certain?" "Yes." He cupped her face gently, carefully, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Then he leaned in and kissed her, and it was nothing like Robert's kisses had been. There was no demand, no possession, just sweetness and question. Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something that might have been the beginning of love, and she kissed him back. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he whispered. "I thought you should know." Clara's breath caught. She wanted to say it back, but the words stuck in her throat, still tangled with old fear. "I am getting there," she said instead, and hoped he understood. "That is enough," Yates assured her. "That is more than enough." They sat together by the fire, Clara tucked into Yates's side, his arm around her, and talked until late. He told her more about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the horse breeding, about someday having children running around the property. Clara found herself sharing those dreams, adding her own thoughts, imagining a future that seemed possible for the first time in years. That night when they parted for bed, Clara caught Yates's hand. "Would you stay with me tonight?" she asked, then quickly added, "Just to sleep." "I am not ready for more, but I would like to not be alone." "I would like that too," Yates said gently. They lay together in the bed that had been his, now theirs, fully clothed and above the covers at first, awkward and uncertain. But gradually they relaxed, and Clara found herself curling into Yates's warmth, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. She felt safe in a way she had not felt since before her parents died, maybe in a way she had never felt before. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Yates asked, his voice rough with sleep. "For keeping your promise, for ending my old life and helping me build a new one." His arm tightened around her gently. "Thank you for trusting me enough to try." Winter came to Nevada with cold winds and occasional snow, and Clara found she loved it. The ranch became a small island of warmth and safety in a frozen world. She and Yates grew closer each day, learning each other's habits and rhythms. He taught her to shoot, to read weather signs, to doctor sick animals. She taught him that a house could be a home, that meals could be more than fuel, that he was worthy of softness and care. 3 months into their marriage, Clara initiated their first real intimacy, and found that with patience and trust, that part of marriage could be beautiful instead of frightening. Yates was careful, attentive, making sure she felt safe every moment. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Clara felt tears on her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" Yates asked immediately, pulling back to look at her with worry. "No," Clara assured him, holding him close. "You made me feel cherished. I did not know it could be like that." "It should always be like that," Yates said fiercely. "You deserve to be cherished, Clara. Always." "I love you," Clara said, and realized it was true. Somewhere along the way, between the small kindnesses and the patient waiting, between learning to trust and learning to hope, she had fallen completely in love with her rancher husband. Yates kissed her then, deep and thorough, and she felt his smile against her lips. "I love you too. So much that sometimes I cannot believe you are real, that you are actually here with me." "I am real," Clara promised, "and I am not going anywhere." Spring came, and with it, new life on the ranch. Foals were born, calves dropped, and Clara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had wanted children, but the thought of being vulnerable, of bringing a helpless life into the world, still frightened her. Yates was ecstatic but also nervous. "I will take care of you," he promised. "Both of you. I will make sure you have the best care." Margaret Hughes, the doctor's wife who had witnessed their wedding, came to visit regularly as Clara's pregnancy progressed. She brought herbs and advice and became a good friend. Through her, Clara met other women in the area, forming a small community of support. The pregnancy was not easy. Clara was sick for the first few months, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable. But Yates was attentive, rubbing her swollen feet, bringing her cool water, taking over household tasks when she was too tired. Miguel and Tomás helped too, and Clara felt surrounded by people who cared for her. In late autumn, a year after Clara had first arrived in Goldfield, she went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara was sure she would not survive. But Margaret was there, and Yates was there, holding her hand and refusing to leave despite propriety suggesting he should. "I am not leaving you," he said fiercely when Margaret suggested he wait outside. "She is my wife. I will stay." And he did, through all the hours of pain and fear, until finally, as dawn broke over the Nevada desert, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel, after Yates's father, and when Yates held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face, Clara felt her heart so full she thought it might burst. "We made this," Yates said in wonder. "We made a family." "We did," Clara agreed, exhausted but happy. "We really did." The first years of Samuel's life were busy and full. Clara discovered she loved being a mother, loved watching her son grow and learn. Yates was a devoted father, teaching Samuel about the ranch as soon as he could walk, carrying him around on his shoulders, reading to him every night. The ranch prospered. Yates's horse breeding program became well known in the region, and people came from miles around to buy his stock. Miguel and Tomás remained with them, and when Tomás married a girl from town, they built another cottage on the property. The ranch became a community, a place where people took care of each other. Clara sometimes thought about Robert, wondered if he had ever looked for her. But those thoughts came less and less frequently, until he was just a bad memory, a chapter of her life that was fully closed. She was Clara Kimball now, not Clara Anderson. She was a rancher's wife, a mother, a woman who had survived hell and come out stronger. When Samuel was 3, Clara became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. She gave birth to a daughter, Rose, who had Yates's blue eyes and Clara's dark hair. And 2 years after that, another son, James, who was colicky and demanding but beloved nonetheless. The house expanded to hold their growing family, with Yates and Miguel building additional rooms. The ranch grew too, with more land purchased, more cattle, more horses. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, secure in a way Clara had never thought possible. On a warm evening in the summer of 1890, 8 years after Clara had first arrived in Goldfield with a black eye and a heart full of fear, she stood on the porch watching her children play. Samuel was 11 now, tall and serious like his father. Rose was 5, bright and curious. James was 3, a whirlwind of energy. In the corral, Yates was working with a new horse, patient as always, while Tomas's children ran around with Copper, who was old now but still game to play. Yates finished with the horse and walked over to the porch, climbing the steps to stand beside Clara. He slipped his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him automatically, the gesture so natural now that she did not think about it. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the day I arrived," Clara said. "About how terrified I was, how certain I was that I would never be happy again. And about how wrong I was." "I am glad you were wrong," Yates said, kissing her temple. "I cannot imagine life without you, without this." "You told me that day that my old life ended," Clara recalled. "You kept that promise. You helped me build something new, something beautiful." "We built it together," Yates corrected. "You were so brave, Clara. You saved yourself by coming here. I just gave you a place to land." "You gave me more than that," Clara said, turning to face him fully. "You gave me safety and respect and love. You showed me what a real partnership looks like. You gave me a family and a home and a future. You gave me everything." Yates cupped her face gently, the same way he had that first time he kissed her, and looked at her with eyes full of love. "You gave me everything too. Before you came, I was just existing. You taught me how to truly live." They kissed there on the porch as the sun set over their valley, their children playing nearby, the ranch they had built together sprawling around them. It was not a perfect life. There were still hard days, difficult seasons, challenges to face. But it was a good life, a life they had chosen, a life built on trust and respect and genuine love. Samuel called out for his father, needing help with something, and Yates went to him with a smile. Rose ran to Clara, demanding to be picked up, and Clara lifted her daughter onto her hip, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. James was digging in the dirt, probably ruining another set of clothes, but Clara could not bring herself to care. Miguel emerged from his cottage and waved, calling out a greeting in Spanish. Tomas's wife rang the dinner bell, summoning her own family. Copper barked, chasing after one of the chickens that had escaped its pen. The ranch was alive with sound and movement and life. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Clara and Yates sat together on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Nevada sky. The same stars that had watched over her that first terrifying night now witnessed her contentment. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked quietly. "Answering my advertisement, coming west to marry a stranger, not once," Clara said firmly. "It was the best decision I ever made. You kept your promise, Yates. That life ended the day I arrived, and you helped me build something better than I ever dreamed possible." "I love you," Yates said, pulling her close. "More than I thought it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Clara replied, and settled into his embrace, feeling utterly safe and completely loved. The years continued to pass, each one adding to the rich tapestry of their life together. Samuel grew tall and strong, eventually taking over more and more of the ranch operations. He married a sensible girl from town, a teacher named Anne, and they built their own house on the property. Rose became a talented horsewoman, with a gift for training that surpassed even her father's. She was courted by several young men but remained fiercely independent, insisting she would only marry for love. James, the youngest, inherited his mother's kindness and his father's work ethic, becoming the heart of the family. Clara and Yates grew older together, their hair turning gray, their movements becoming slower. But their love only deepened with time, aged like fine wine. They faced losses. Miguel passed peacefully in his sleep, and Copper finally succumbed to old age. But they also experienced continued joys. Grandchildren, the expansion of the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the region, the respect of their community. On a cool autumn evening in 1910, 28 years after Clara had first arrived in Goldfield, she and Yates celebrated their anniversary. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch, filling the expanded house with laughter and love. There was food and music and dancing, and Clara found herself swept into Yates's arms for a waltz, just as she had been taught so long ago in another life. "Remember when you could barely look at me without flinching," Yates murmured as they danced. "I was so scared," Clara admitted. "Scared of you, scared of everything. I could not imagine ever feeling safe again. And now I cannot imagine feeling any other way." Clara looked up at her husband, seeing the young rancher he had been in the lines of the older man he had become. "You made good on every promise, Yates. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." "We gave each other that," Yates corrected, as he always did. "I was half a person before you came. You completed me." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by the family they had created, on the land they had built into something lasting. When the party finally wound down and their children and grandchildren departed, Clara and Yates sat together on their porch, as they had done thousands of times before. "I am 62 years old," Clara said thoughtfully. "I have lived more of my life with you than without you now. Sometimes I can barely remember the girl who stepped off that stage coach with a black eye and a heart full of fear." "She is still in there," Yates said, taking her hand. "She is the foundation of the woman you became. She was brave enough to save herself, brave enough to trust again, brave enough to build something beautiful out of ashes." "We both were," Clara said. "We saved each other, I think." "I think you are right," Yates agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moonrise over their valley, over the life they had built through hard work and patience and love. The house behind them was full of memories, every room holding stories of their years together. The land around them bore the marks of their labor, shaped by their dreams and their determination. "That life ends today," Clara said softly, quoting the words Yates had spoken so long ago. "You were right. It did end, and something so much better began." "No regrets?" Yates asked. "Not a single one," Clara promised. "Only gratitude. For you, for this, for every day we have had together." "Then I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Yates said and kissed her hand gently. The years continued their steady march forward. Rose eventually married a veterinarian who shared her love of animals, and they settled nearby. James took over the day-to-day running of the ranch as Yates and Clara eased into a slower pace. The grandchildren multiplied, and then great-grandchildren arrived, each one a new blessing. Clara taught the granddaughters to cook and sew and garden, passing on skills and stories. Yates taught the grandsons to ride and rope and read the weather, instilling in them the values of hard work and integrity. Together, they became the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family, beloved and respected by all. On a spring morning in 1920, Yates did not wake up. He passed in his sleep peacefully, with Clara beside him as he had been beside her for 38 years. The grief was crushing, but Clara found comfort in knowing that he had lived a full, happy life, that he had died surrounded by love, that he had kept every promise he ever made to her. The funeral was large, with people coming from all over Nevada to pay their respects to a man who had been fair and kind and honorable. Clara stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, drawing strength from the family Yates had helped her create. In the months that followed, Clara remained at the ranch, unable to imagine living anywhere else. The house held too many memories, the land held too much of both their spirits. She walked the property daily, talking to Yates as if he were still beside her, telling him about the grandchildren's accomplishments, about the new foals, about the way the seasons changed. She lived another 8 years, long enough to see Samuel become a grandfather himself, long enough to watch Rose's veterinary practice flourish, long enough to know that James would carry on the ranch with the same integrity his father had. She lived long enough to know that the legacy she and Yates had built would continue long after they were both gone. On a warm summer evening in 1928, Clara sat on the porch with a blanket around her shoulders despite the heat. She was 80 years old now, and tired in a way that went bone deep. But she was not afraid. She had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and purpose. Samuel sat beside her, himself gray-haired now, and held her hand. "Are you all right, Mother?" "I am wonderful," Clara assured him. "I am thinking about your father. I will see him soon, I think." "Mother," Samuel said, his voice breaking. "Do not be sad," Clara told him gently. "I have had a beautiful life, far better than I ever dared hope for. I have you and your siblings, all these grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I have this ranch, this legacy. I have had love, real love, the kind that lasts beyond death. Not everyone gets that. I am grateful for every moment." She squeezed his hand and closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the ranch wash over her. Children laughing, horses whinnying, the wind in the cottonwoods by the creek. She could almost hear Yates's voice, calling to her from somewhere just beyond sight. "That life ends today," she whispered, remembering. And then, with a smile on her face and peace in her heart, Clara Kimball let go, confident that a new beginning waited beyond, where a rancher with kind eyes and gentle hands was waiting to take her home. The ranch continued for generations after, known throughout Nevada as a place built on love and hard work, and the courage of a woman who had arrived with nothing but fear and found everything she never knew she needed. The story was passed down through the family, the tale of how their grandfather had promised their grandmother that her old life would end, and how together they had built something that lasted far beyond their years. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the valley, some of the family swore they could still feel the presence of Yates and Clara, watching over the land they loved, the family they created, the legacy that proved that from the darkest circumstances could grow the most beautiful light. Their love story became legend, a testament to the power of kindness, the strength found in gentleness, and the profound truth that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is trust again after trust has been shattered. They had built a love that transcended time, and in doing so, had given their descendants not just land and wealth, but something far more valuable, an example of what love should truly be.